the writing of Professor Noam Chomsky, who's a very important figure on the American left. Though he calls himself an anarchist, he keeps forgetting that he is one at just the moments it might do him some good. But he is, at any rate, of major influence on the American left. And I realized a few years ago that there was a difference between him, Professor Chomsky, I mean, and myself. Which he did not finally think that the United States of America was a good idea. He thought it had been sort of all genocide since Columbus, basically. I mean, that's not simplifying his opinion by very much.
Am I to take it, I must ask this question to the audience, really. It's a rhetorical question, if you will, but I'll ask it obviously to you too, sir. That if the United States government did what many of us in Washington have been urging it to do, and to intervene in Darfur against slavery and genocide against black Africans, would you set up the cry, we had no right to do this because we once invaded Nicaragua? Would that be all you could say if we decided to help our African brothers and sisters from genocide and slavery? There seem to be people who said, if I wasn't wrong, there were fools in this audience who applauded sentiments like that a few moments ago. I just think you should hear what your own arguments sound like when they're played back to you. I think you deserve that.
Another email. What is Mr. Hitchens' opinion of Noam Chomsky, Chomsky's popularity among the left?
Well, I used to be on quite good terms with Professor Chomsky. I don't think he's writing as brilliantly or arguing as well now, and I think it has to do with the impossible task he's set himself of effectively explaining away Islamic jihadism as a function of American policy mistakes. I think he began doing this a little earlier, actually, during the Bosnian Wars, when we first began to disagree, where he almost seemed to write as if the United States was looking to punish the Milosevic regime because it was a gallant socialist exemption to the general trend of globalization and needed to be hauled back into line. I thought anyone who could interpret what was happening in the Balkans that way, where Milosevic was the aggressor so palpably, was losing perspective, and I'm afraid that's what Professor Chomsky has crucially done.
I have no time for oppressive religion of any stripe, but I think you are well aware of the long history of crimes committed by the British government in Iraq, the United States government in Vietnam, and today in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm wondering how you can possibly say that it is Western civilization, the civilization of the colonizers and the oppressors, who do it all, of course, in the name of liberation and democracy, how this is not the fundamental problem, rather than what you call the jihad of what I consider to be the response to the crimes of U.S. and European imperialism.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. You see how far the termites have spread and how long and well they've dined. And someone can get up and say that in a meeting of unbelievers, that the problem is Western civilization, not the Islamic threat to it. That's how far the termites have gone. That is a compendium and anthology of the war crimes committed by the United States and its allies. One of those crimes, I'll just give you an example to show how utterly fatuous your implication is. One of those crimes was the arming and training of the Indonesian armed forces to take over the Republic of East Timor. Some of you are no doubt aware of this terrible atrocity. It's one of Noam Chomsky's best campaigns in writing, leading to the very near physical extirpation of the people of East Timor. A genocide more comprehensive than Cambodia, taking place a little afterwards, with our weapons, with our diplomatic protection, and with the endorsement of Kissinger and Ford. But bear it in mind and look it up. Now, what are some of the items of the Al-Qaeda bin Laden manifesto? Well, oddly enough, and this was to my surprise, I thought it would be lower down. Item 3 in the charge against the West is that it reversed course on East Timor, tried to undo the genocide, brought East Timor to a referendum on independence, sent Jose Vera de Mello, one of the greatest Sergio Vieira de Mello, one of the greatest UN civil servants, to East Timor to supervise the transition to independence and the election, and made East Timor the newest member of the UN. Bin Laden says, "For this we will never forgive the Christian crusaders and their imperialist friends. They took away a republic from a Muslim land, Indonesia." Most of the people of East Timor, by the way, are Christian and speak Portuguese. A detail. For this, we will never forgive them. For this, that was the reason they gave for blowing up the UN office in Iraq, because that's where Melio was sent next, with a truck bomb of explosives so enormous that it must have been borrowed from the former Iraqi army and Ba'ath Party. That's the reason they gave for blowing up the Australian tourists in Bali, in Indonesia, and the Indonesian taxi drivers who were servicing that resort, because they couldn't forgive the West for its behavior in East Timor. In other words, if you want to avoid upsetting these people, you have to let Indonesia commit genocide in East Timor. Otherwise, they'll be upset with you. You'll have made an enemy. If you tell them they can't throw acid in the faces of unveiled women in Karachi, they will be annoyed with you. If you say, we insist, we think that cartoonists in Copenhagen can print satire on the Prophet Muhammad, you've just made an enemy. You've brought it on. You're encouraging it to happen. So unless you're willing to commit suicide for yourself and for this culture, get used to the compromises you'll have to make and the eventual capitulation that will come to you. But bloody well don't do that in my name, because I'm not doing it. You surrender in your own name, leave me out of it. I'm going to fight these people and every other theocrat all the way. All the way. For free expression, for women's rights, for self-determination of small peoples, for the right of Iraqis to federate and have their own show, for the right of the Lebanese not to be bullied by Hezbollah and to have a multicultural democracy. Yes, I'll fight for this, and I think that the 82nd Airborne is brave to be fighting for it too. And I think you should be ashamed sneering at people who guard you while you sleep. Thanks. What's happened with a lot of the left is that they genuinely think that Islamic jihadism is a movement of brown-skinned, disempowered people who've had a hard time. If they're against the United States empire, they must be doing something right. So, and most of these people are fantastically ignorant. They know nothing about it. They've cared not at all to inform themselves. So if you say to them, actually Al-Qaeda begins in India, Pakistan, as an attempt to destroy the brown-skinned multi-ethnic democracy of India by wrenching Kashmir out of the Indian state and starting a civil war, that it makes war on the other Asian democracies of the Philippines and Indonesia, in all cases trying to build a separate ultra-fundamentalist Muslim state. They know that at all. They just feel it must be owed something. And lately I've noticed that Bin Laden's been getting this and playing it back. He's been recommending to people that they read Noam Chomsky, for example. I don't know what Noam thinks when he reads this. And he shouldn't be blamed for it. But they're trying to get more subtle about it too. These people who want homosexuals to be buried alive, who want women to be slaves, who want, you know the story, you know what the Taliban is like, still think they might trick themselves out in some discarded left colors. It's a disgusting business. Live with that if you can, but don't fucking call me an imperialist for pointing it out, okay? Get real.
But there's a tendency on the left, and I bet there are people here who know what I'm talking about, to think that if someone in any way disagrees with the left, it must be for the lowest possible reason. And that if you found the lowest possible motive, you found the right one. There's this whole culture of no one would leave us or quarrel with us if they weren't a sellout. It's actually a very sick mentality and very widespread. And people who think like that or feel like that can dump me if they want, but that's almost as much as to say that they weren't much of a friend.
These are things that require intense reasoning and thought. What I got was none of that at all. I got basically, and again, as I said, it takes a lot to make me cry, and I have a fairly broad back and a fairly thick skin. What I got was, why have you become a tool of the Jewish lobby? Huh? Why have you joined the Bush family's relentless quest to pick a fight, which they've been trying to avoid for all these things? why are you a warmongering neoconservative? Unbelievable stuff of this kind.